I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Heather Ring. I'm the Executive Director of the Innocence Project of Minnesota. I can't tell you how thrilled we are to have you here, and we did plan our recent release just for this event. So thanks for coming. We could not have had a more serendipitous week. It's been crazy, it's been fun, it's been a roller coaster, but most importantly, for our client, it's been a life-changing experience. And you can imagine that being there that day with him was incredible. Terry can't make it today. He is with his mother. He's visiting his father's grave and spending some time with his family. He is absolutely thrilled. He extends his thanks to all of you who support the Innocence Project and to all of us and all of those who are here tonight who worked on his case. So we can't be more thrilled. We're just excited to have you here to celebrate. And now to the speaker. Tonight we have Laura Nirider here with us. We are incredibly lucky. For those of you, maybe just a show of hands, anybody heard of Making a Murderer? Well, that's a good thing. That way we can at least start with that. Well, we were lucky enough to have a born and bred Minnesotan, and you know how that goes. They try to leave, but they always end up back. And that's Laura. Laura most recently had a great success in, she is representing Brendan Dassey, who was the young man that we all watched in sort of tortured silence when he was being interrogated for hours at a time by law enforcement in Manitowoc County. Brendan Dassey recently had his conviction overturned because of the young woman standing over there. I mean, I don't know what else to say. We should just do a round of applause.
Heather, and thank you everyone. It's just a pleasure to be here. Let me see if I can actually extract this thing so it can be a little more natural up here. Well, when I first heard the name Brendan Dassey, it was 2007, and I was a third-year law student at Northwestern University in Chicago. I was enrolled in a clinical class on wrongful convictions. Brendan Dassey had just been convicted in Wisconsin of the rape and murder of a young woman named Teresa Halbach, based on a confession he gave during a videotaped police interrogation. And my then professor, Steve Drizzen, had just agreed to represent him on appeal and in post-conviction proceedings. And I suppose, as the nearest available law student, I got picked to be on the case. Well, I remember it to this day. Steve handed me the interrogation video, the same tape that you saw in Making a Murderer. And he asked me to watch it. I brought it home, I sat down on my couch, I popped it into my laptop. And I watched 3.5 hours of police interrogators extracting an obviously false statement from a frightened 16-year-old boy who was in that interrogation room so hopelessly alone. And my stomach turned. I felt outrage and heartbreak, and I knew that I wanted to do something about it. So from that point on, I threw myself into Brendan's case, not only, as it turned out, as a law student, but when I graduated and I went to work at a large law firm, I continued to co-counsel on Brendan's case, pro bono, and eventually I came back to Northwestern as clinical faculty myself to work on Brendan's case and the cases of other people like him. In 2010, we held a post-conviction hearing in Wisconsin in which we put on testimony of a false confession expert. We cross-examined the cops. We argued that his confession was false and coerced and not worth the tape it was recorded on. And I noticed then, during that hearing, there were 2 women off in the corner with a video camera, just quietly filming the proceedings. After a few days, we went over and we asked them, "Who are you and what are you doing?" And they told us that they wanted to make a movie. Well, we figured we would never hear from them again. Fast forward 6 years and this thing has gone global, and I'm going, why didn't I brush my hair before that aired? Well, at any rate, Brendan's case and the work that I've been fortunate enough to do on it quite literally changed my life. From the moment I watched that videotaped interrogation, I developed a passion for wrongful convictions and a fascination with false confessions. That passion has shaped my career ever since then, and it's a passion that I know is shared by the Innocence Project of Minnesota. We now know that Brendan Dassey is not an anomaly. Interrogations like his unfold in interrogation rooms across the country every hour of every day. Teenagers and children like him are questioned using psychologically manipulative techniques designed for adults every hour of every day. And wrongful convictions like his happen in courtrooms large and small, to children and to adults, in serious cases and insignificant cases, in guilty plea cases and cases that go to trial, to mentally sound folks and those struggling with mental illness or intellectual disability, in Chicago and in the Twin Cities and in every other corner of the country, every hour of the day. This is the guiding light. This is the reason for being that animates groups like the Innocence Project of Minnesota and like the organization that Steve and I launched together when I returned to Northwestern, the Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth. We now know of hundreds of proven false confessions. These are confessions that have been proven false by DNA evidence. Someone was brought into an interrogation room just like Brendan Dassey, questioned by police officers, gave inculpatory statements, were convicted based on those statements. And then years later, an organization like ours came along and did DNA testing and proved that confession false. We know of hundreds of these cases. In fact, when you look just at homicide exonerations, false confessions are the most common cause of wrongful convictions. What's interesting when you look at these false confessions, these proven false confessions, what's interesting is that they're detailed, right? They appear to be plausible. They sound accurate and believable. They often even contain accurate information about how the crime happened. That's why they're so convincing. That's why they're such a deadly potent form of evidence. A full 81% of people who falsely confessed and went to trial were still convicted, nonetheless. So from studying cases like Brendan's, where the interrogation was recorded, we now can understand some of the nuts and bolts of how these confessions happen and how they end up being so convincing sounding. We understand that people become incentivized to falsely confess during interrogations, when they are told by police that their conviction will be certain and their punishment will be harsh unless they cut their losses by cooperating, which usually means saying whatever the investigator will accept as the truth. If they confess, they are often told everything will be okay, you won't have to worry about a thing. This will all be over. And for a kid like Brendan, you can get out of this room and go see your mom. All you have to do is confess. You see, far too often, courts allow investigators to make these kinds of implications of leniency, even if they're false. Investigators are also allowed to lie about the evidence, claiming that there's a fingerprint or a witness who saw you commit the crime. Some evidence linked to the suspect. This can be said even if it's false during an interrogation. And then once the suspect decides that he has no real choice but to confess out of self-preservation, we can see from watching these videotaped confessions just how a false confession becomes so detailed, so accurate, and so persuasive. You can actually watch the suspect piece together a narrative based on information disclosed to him during the interrogation by the officer. This process of threatening harm if you don't confess, but leniency if you do confess. The process of feeding facts to a suspect over and over during an interrogation until he finally figures out how to get the story right. All of this happened to Brendan. And it happens in most false confession cases. And that's why I'm so happy to say that the federal court concluded that for a kid like Brendan, 16 years old with intellectual limitations, this process steamrolled his free will and produced a confession that was false, and it overturned the conviction. I'm also happy that the Innocence Project of Minnesota had a great result in another false confession case just a few days ago. Well done, and congratulations. I don't know the case as well as you all do, of course, but I remember that we also reviewed his case back in the day. We believed without a doubt that he was innocent. And once you develop that faith in another human being like Terry, as you all have done, you know it changes the way you think about the justice system. When you walk with someone who has been wrongfully convicted, who has been kept in a cage for years unjustly, who's been demonized in the media, to whom it seems sometimes that the courts themselves turn a cold shoulder, I believe it helps you see the humanity and the decency and the worth of every other person on this planet, even the guilty. So thanks to you all in this room, for supporting this worthy effort and this worthy organization. I hope very much that Brendan will one day be able to come here with me to extend his support and deep gratitude to you all as well. As you know, my colleagues and I have represented Brendan now for 9 years. He's grown up from a boy who was 17 when I first met him to a gentle man of 26 who still calls his mother every Wednesday and Sunday. He likes to read. He plays cribbage. And believe it or not, he's trying to learn how to crochet a blanket. He's a man that I'm proud to know. I'm proud to call my friend. Isn't that true of so many of our clients? When you walk with them through this process, they become so much more than clients. They become friends and one of us. And to my friends here at the Innocence Project of Minnesota, I can only say thank you for your friendship. Congratulations on giving Terry his life back. And best wishes for the many more that are sure to come. Thank you.